For most people, Sun Tzu exists as a slogan rather than a thinker. His name floats through business talks, startup culture, and social media quotes as shorthand for domination and clever aggression. He's presented as the patron saint of winning, a master of force, deception, and tactical brilliance. But that popular image completely misses why the art of war mattered in the first place. Sun Tzu wasn't obsessed with defeating enemies. He was obsessed with what war costs after the cheering stops. He didn't write to glorify conflict. He wrote to warn states what conflict does to their finances, strip away the myth. And Sun Tzu emerges not as a philosopher of victory, but as one of history's earliest analysts of economic collapse. The world Sun Tzu lived in was tearing itself apart. During the late spring and autumn period and the rise of the warring states, China was fragmented into rival kingdoms locked in near-constant conflict. Every ruler believed unification was just one campaign away. Every ruler funded armies as if victory was inevitable. And every ruler underestimated the bill. Warfare had evolved from ceremonial clashes between nobles into industrial-scale mobilization. Infantry replaced chariots. Armies expanded into the hundreds of thousands. Feeding them required harvests, transport networks, taxation systems, and bureaucracies that strained even the strongest states. War was no longer an event, it was an economic condition. Each time an army marched, it drained labor from farms, metal from tools, grain from storage, and money from treasuries. Campaigns weren't just fought against enemies, they were fought against time, supply chains, and fiscal reality. A short war could destabilize a kingdom. A long one could destroy it outright. Sun Tzu didn't see this as a military failure, he saw it as a financial one. Leaders weren't losing because their tactics were poor. They were losing because they were spending beyond their capacity to sustain. That's what separates Sun Tzu from almost every other military thinker of the ancient world. While others focused on courage, honor, and decisive battle, Sun Tzu focused on endurance. He evaluated war the way a cautious steward evaluates risk. His concern wasn't how to fight better, it was how to avoid bleeding the state dry. When he famously wrote that war is a matter of vital importance, he wasn't elevating its nobility, he was underlining its danger. War wasn't glorious. It was destabilizing. Mishandled, it could collapse everything it claimed to protect. This is why the art of war spends so little time celebrating combat itself. Instead, it returns again and again to efficiency, timing, information, and restraint. When Sun Tzu argues that the highest form of victory is winning without fighting, he isn't speaking metaphorically, he's describing the cheapest outcome. Conflict avoided is capital preserved. Bloodless submission is not moral idealism, it's fiscal realism. A state that achieves its objectives without deploying armies retains its workforce, its tax base, and its long-term stability. Sun Tzu repeatedly warns against prolonged warfare not because it's morally wrong, but because it's economically corrosive. The longer an army stays in the field, the more it consumes. Supply transport costs more than troop wages, farmland lies fallow, inflation creeps in, public resentment grows. Even victory becomes hollow if the economy underneath it collapses. Sun Tzu understood something modern policymakers often relearn the hard way. You don't lose wars only on the battlefield. You lose them in the budget. Before Sun Tzu, warfare in China had been guided by aristocratic codes where symbolism often mattered more than sustainability. But that model broke under population growth and technological change. War became systematic, bureaucratic, and ruinously expensive. Sun Tzu recognized that treating it as a stage for heroics was suicidal. Once warfare scaled, it had to be managed like an economic project. That meant calculating costs, minimizing waste, and refusing battles that offered prestige but no financial return. This perspective turns the art of war into something unusual, a military text that reads like an audit. When Sun Tzu outlines the factors that determine success, he's not listing virtues, he's identifying variables: stability of governance, environmental conditions, organizational competence, discipline. These are inputs and constraints. He's asking whether a state can afford the conflict it's contemplating. His message is implicit but clear. If you cannot calculate the cost, you have no right to calculate strategy. Nowhere is this clearer than in his fixation on logistics. Sun Tzu openly states that distance multiplies expense. Every mile from home increases waste. Every delay compounds loss. An army fed by its own supply lines weakens the economy it depends on. An army fed by the enemy strengthens itself while draining its opponent. This isn't clever maneuvering, it's balance sheet logic. Sun Tzu treats supply not as a background concern, but as the central battlefield. Control resources and the outcome follows. Even his emphasis on intelligence fits the same pattern. Information, for Sun Tzu, is not about cleverness, it's about savings. Accurate knowledge prevents misallocation. A single piece of reliable intelligence can stop an army from marching in the wrong direction, wasting months of resources. Foreknowledge reduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is expensive. In modern terms, Sun Tzu understood that bad data destroys capital faster than bad intentions. Speed, too, is misunderstood. Readers often interpret Sun Tzu's calls for speed as aggression. In reality, speed is cost control. Fast campaigns shorten exposure. Decisive movement avoids drawn-out attrition. Delay is not cautious, it's expensive. The longer an army waits, the more it consumes without producing results. Sun Tzu wasn't urging recklessness. He was urging efficiency. Underneath every chapter runs a single idea: opportunity cost. Every choice closes off alternatives. Every unnecessary battle eliminates cheaper paths to the same outcome. Sun Tzu doesn't condemn war itself, he condemns waste. The worst failure, in his view, isn't losing a fight, it's choosing a fight you didn't need. Rulers who enjoyed war as a display of strength were, to Sun Tzu, liabilities to their own states. History vindicated him. States that pursued endless sieges and attritional campaigns hollowed themselves out. Tax revolts followed, internal instability spread. Meanwhile, states that relied on alliances, intelligence, and rapid action preserved their economies and outlasted stronger opponents. Survival didn't belong to the bravest, it belonged to the most financially disciplined. This lesson didn't end in ancient China. Modern history echoes it relentlessly. Empires don't collapse because they lack weapons. They collapse because their economic foundations crack under the strain of prolonged conflict. Vietnam, Afghanistan, World War I. The pattern is the same: tactical success paired with financial exhaustion. Sun Tzu would have recognized these failures instantly. The battlefield changed. The math didn't. Cyber operations, sanctions, proxy conflicts, intelligence campaigns. These are modern expressions of Sun Tzu's principle. Maximum leverage at minimum cost. The most powerful states now compete less through direct confrontation and more through economic pressure, information dominance, and strategic deterrence. Not because they're more ethical, but because they're cheaper. Sun Tzu's real contribution wasn't teaching how to conquer, it was teaching how to remain solvent. He understood that power is inseparable from economic resilience. A state that cannot absorb shocks cannot project strength for long. He saw that victory purchased with insolvency is defeat in disguise. The enduring lesson of the art of war is restraint. To him, the greatest leader wasn't the one who expanded borders, but the one who preserved the conditions that made expansion unnecessary. He wasn't a warrior philosopher. He was a steward of national capital. In the end, Sun Tzu's warning is uncomfortable precisely because it's still true. War is the most expensive policy choice a state can make. Misjudge its cost, and no amount of bravery will save you. Strength isn't measured by how hard you strike, but by how long you can endure. And history shows, again and again, that when systems collide, the disciplined outlast the bold. History doesn't repeat, but it always sends the invoice.